What's going on? Welcome to Cineguac. Today I'm going to show you how to make an interactive hologram. This tutorial will cover motion graphics, title animation, green screen keying, and a whole bunch of other tools in Adobe Premiere Pro. But if you're like, yo, I already know how to do all that stuff, I just want to know how to turn my footage into a hologram, then I've included a timecode in the description below so you can just skip ahead. Anyway, without further ado, let's begin the most epic tutorial on this channel so far. Cineguac. So here we are in Premiere. The first thing you want to do is drag your video clip to the timeline. So as you can see here, I just shot this clip of me doing some ridiculous mimes. I wake up in bed, I swipe something away, I smile, and then I push it back into the phone and go back to bed. So let's just choose the part of the clip that we want. We can begin it right here when I'm still asleep. A message pops up. I wake up, I swipe it away, I push it back into the phone, and I go to bed. So we can mark an out point right there, and then just drag that little piece of the clip to the timeline. So the first thing we can do now that we have our video clip on the timeline is create an animated title. So what we want to do is go to our title tool or hit T on the keyboard and go to the approximate part of the frame where you want your title to live and type whatever message you want to pop up. In this case, I'll write good morning. And like any title, you can customize this however you want. So I'll just highlight this, and then with our text layer highlighted, go to the effects controls, drop this little menu down, and here I can adjust the font, I can adjust the size, I can center it, I can adjust the color. I'll speed through this part. And once you have your title looking the way you want, go to your selection tool, and just sort of drag it to the approximate part of the frame where you want it to land. I'm going to have it land directly above the phone as if the phone is projecting the hologram. And then what we want to do is drag our playhead to the point in our video where we want the title to appear. So it should appear obviously before I wake up, maybe just a couple frames into the clip. And let's drag our title so that it begins right there. It just pops on the frame. And then let's just drag the playhead over so that we can find the point where we want the title to end. So as you can see, I just swipe it away. Let's just give it a couple frames more room. And we can just drag this over. So now we just have a very simple title pop on. I wake up, I swipe it away, and it just disappears. So the next thing we want to do is add a little alpha glow to the title, just to sort of make it glow a little bit so it's not as flat. And we can do that by going to the effects library and searching for alpha glow. You'll find that in the video effects stylized subfolder, and just drag the alpha glow effect to our title. And we play that back. Now that's pretty intense. We might actually want to, with this text layer highlighted, lower the value of the glow effect so that it's not as intense. Right now the glow looks like it's set at 25. Maybe we can reduce this to 20. And when we play that back, let's see how that looks. It's a little bit better. So once we have the title looking the way we want it to, let's animate it so that it pops up onto frame and then swipes away along with the movement of my hand. So the way that we do that is go to our effects library and search for an effect called transform. You'll find the transform effect in the video effects distort subfolder and drag transform onto your title layer. Then move the playhead to the very first frame of your title layer. And in your effects controls, let's move down to our transform options. Let's set a keyframe for position, and let's move this down so that it's just below the phone. And then, using my right arrow on my keyboard, I'm just gonna hit it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. And that just moves the video clip ahead by 5 frames. You can, of course, customize this however you want. In this case, I want the title to sort of swipe on pretty fast, so I'm just gonna do that over the course of 5 frames. So once I'm 5 frames ahead of my first keyframe, I'm gonna set a second keyframe with the title in its final landing position. So let's just adjust the position until it is in place right above the phone. That looks good. the moment you do that, it will automatically create a second keyframe. If we zoom in here, you'll have a better look. And let's go to our second keyframe, and let's hit Control-click, or of course you can just right-click, and go here and select Ease In. And what that does is basically just prevents the title animation from coming to an abrupt stop. It sort of comes to a very smooth ease in. So when we play that back, it looks like that. And then let's find the point where I swipe it away. Once again, I'm just hitting the right arrow on my keyboard to sort of toggle one frame at a time. And it looks like it should start animating off screen right about there. So with our title layer selected, let's go back to Effects Controls and scroll down. And once again, in the Transform options where it says Position, let's set a keyframe right there and move forward just to the point where my hand is completely swiped away. And let's change the position right over there. So now, when we play that back, it looks like it swipes away along with the movement of my hand. Now, once we have all of our motion keyframes done, what we can do is create a little motion blur so that the movement looks way more natural. And the way that we do that is once again with our title layer selected, let's go back to Effects Controls and under the Transform options, let's scroll all the way down to where it says Shutter Angle. And let's change that to 180. And then let's unselect the Use Compositions shutter angle. So now when we play that back, it adds a very naturalistic looking motion blur to the movement of the title. Next thing we want to do is, just so that the title doesn't look like it's coming from the bottom of the frame, and then when I swipe it away, it doesn't just stop here at this random point, let's add a crop effect. So we can move this playhead over to the point where it begins swiping on, just so we have a better look at what we're doing, and go to our effects library and type in crop. You'll find that in the Video Effects Transform subfolder, and drag the crop effect to your title layer. And with that title layer selected, go back up to your effects controls, scroll down, and let's just toggle the bottom value in our crop settings until the bottom of that clip sort of lands right in the middle of the phone, maybe a little bit closer to the top. So now it's going to look a little bit more realistic, as though the title appears in the middle of the phone as opposed to just the bottom of the entire video clip. And then we can do the same thing for over here. When I swipe it away, we want to drag the right value just so that it lands at the edge of the phone. So now what we're doing with this crop effect is just sort of containing the title within the area of the phone. So when we play all that back, it pops out from the phone and swipes away. Now I notice that there is a little bit of a harsh line right there with the crop effect, and we can easily get rid of that by just going back to our crop options and increasing the edge feather value. And that'll sort of smooth or feather the edges so that it's not as harsh. And as you can see, we now have a beautiful animated title. Not looking like a hologram yet, but don't worry, we're about to get there. So now that we've animated our title to look exactly how we want, the next thing we can do is add a video clip. So what we can do is go back to our project library, and as you can see here, I have a video clip that I shot for a music video for the DJ duo Nervo, and here we have one of the artists against a green screen. So let's just find a part of the clip that we want to use. This is a nice little isolated movement right here. So let's just mark our in point, and it ends right there. And let's mark our out point, and let's just drag this little piece of video to the timeline. And once we have this video clip on the timeline, what we want to do is key out the green screen and everything else around it so that only the subject remains. And the way that we do that is by going to the effects library and searching for an effect called Ultra Key. You can find that in Video Effects Keying subfolder, and drag the Ultra Key effect to the video clip. And with that video clip selected, you can just go back up to Effects Controls, and scroll down to the Ultra Key settings, and right here where it says Key Color, you'll find this little eyedrop tool. And if you just click on it and hold it down, and then let go right above the green screen, it will turn everything that's green completely transparent. Now that's all fine and dandy, but it looks like we still want to get rid of all of this other excess stuff so that only the subject remains. And the way that we do that is still with this video clip selected. Let's go back to Effects Controls, and where it says Opacity, select the Free Draw Bezier tool, and let's just mask around the subject. And the moment you connect it right there, everything else disappears and only your subject remains. Now, just to sort of perfect the keying job, what we can do is go back to your video clip, make sure it's selected, and in Effects Controls, let's go right back to our Ultra Key settings. And right here where it says Output, let's change this little drop-down option from Composite to Alpha Channel. And what we're going to do is adjust all of these settings. We can just sort of toggle them back and forth. And the goal is to make the background completely black while your subject is completely white. And so we can sort of play around with transparency a little bit. And the highlights, shadows, the pedestal. You don't want to push these values too much. If you see the subject starting to turn black, then that's a bad thing. So you want to make sure that it remains as close to solid white as possible. And go to Matte Cleanup, and so on and so forth. And once again, these values are going to change based on what kind of video clip you're working with, what the lighting was like, what kind of colors the subject is wearing, so on and so forth. And once you're done with that, go right back to the output settings and change it back from Alpha Channel to Composite. And as you can see now, we have a near perfect keying job in Adobe Premiere Pro. And when you play that back, she remains isolated from everything that was behind her. And once we've done that, what we want to do is go back to our video clip and right click or hit Control click. And let's nest this. And let's just call this Video 1. And what this basically does is consolidates all these effects that we just added to this video clip into one standalone video layer so that any other future effects that we add to it won't really affect the Ultra Key at all. It won't interfere with the positioning of our opacity mask, for example, or any other effect that we just added a moment ago. It sort of locks in all of the work that we've done so that we can more easily manipulate the clip as a whole. So what we can do is, with this video layer selected, go back up to the Effects Controls, and under Motion, we can just adjust the size of this image however we want, and the position. Let's make this a little bit bigger. And let's move it over, and let's move her up a little bit so that it looks like she's popping right out of the phone. And the next thing we want to do is animate her the exact same way that we animated the title just a moment ago. So what we're going to do is go back to our effects library and search for Transform. And drag the Transform effect onto our video layer. And of course, before we start adding all these motion keyframes, let's find the point in our video clip where we want her to appear and then disappear. So she should swipe onto frame the moment that the Good Morning title swipes out of frame. So right around here, it looks like the Good Morning title begins to move. So let's just drag our video layer so that it begins right at that point. And with our video layer selected, let's make sure the playhead is all the way at the very first frame. Let's scroll down to our transform settings, and let's set a keyframe for the position. And we can just move this over, just like that, and set a position keyframe, and then move ahead 5 frames, just like we did for the title. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and let's set another keyframe for the position in her final landing position, right about there. And then just like we did for the title, let's zoom in here. And just so that she doesn't come to an abrupt stop, let's hit Control click or right click and select ease in. So now as you can see when we play that back, she slides into frame the moment that the title slides out of frame. And let's just skip ahead to where I make her go away. Now I see that she pops out of frame, so this is a very easy fix. If we just double click our nest, we now have the original clip. Let's just extend this a whole bunch. And then when we go back to our original sequence, we can now elongate this clip however long we want. So now we can find the point of the clip where I make her go back into the phone. Looks like it should start around there. So with that video clip selected, let's go back to Effects Controls, scroll down, set a new keyframe for position, and with the right arrow on my keyboard, move forward until my hand is all the way down, and set a new keyframe where she's completely gone. You can still see her head here a little bit, but don't worry, just like we cropped the title layer, we will then crop this video layer. So now what we can do is play around with the crop so that she only appears when she's right above the phone. So with our video layer selected, let's go back to Effects Controls. Let's scroll down to the crop effect. And let's just move the left side of that frame over, just like that. And then when she's pushed back down, let's move the bottom right up there. And don't forget to feather the edges a little bit. Maybe we can change that to 30. Once again, that just sort of makes the crop line a little bit smoother so that it's not a harsh line. And when we play all that through, we now have a perfectly smooth transition, and then I push her back into the phone. And of course, to add a little bit more of a naturalistic looking motion blur, we can select this video layer once again, go to Effects Controls, and where it says Transform, and we have our motion tracking keyframes, we can go to Shutter Angle and change this to 180 and unselect the Use Compositions shutter angle. So now, as you can see when we play that back, there's a nice little motion tracking blur. So now that we have everything in place and animated just the way we want, we can begin making it actually look like a hologram. So what we want to do is select both of these clips and then Control click or right click, and let's nest these together. Once again, just by creating a new nest, this allows us to apply the same effects to everything within that nest. All the video clips, all the effects that we applied, it sort of consolidates it into one nice, easy to use video layer. And let's just name this nest hologram and hit OK. And if you ever want to access the contents within this nest, all you have to do is double click, and there you have the original files that we created. It'll even open it up as a new sequence right here. Anyway, let's go back to our original sequence, and let's begin applying effects to make this video animation look like a hologram. So let's go to our effects library and search for an effect called Grid. You'll find that in Video Effects, Generate Grid, and drag that to the hologram nest. So now as you can see, we just have this odd looking grid above everything. And what we want to do is with this hologram clip selected, let's go to Effects Controls and scroll down to our grid options. And right here where it says blending mode, let's change this to stencil alpha. And the moment you do that, you'll see it applies this grid shape to the video beneath it. But what we want to do is condense these lines so that we see more of the image. Right now there's these large gaps in between everything. So with our hologram video layer selected, let's go to our grid options, and let's just adjust these anchor point values until we see way more of the image. So that looks pretty good right there. And if we actually zoom in, you can see now it basically adds these very digital holographic looking lines. And if we go to the very beginning of our hologram clip, we can set a keyframe for the anchor. And we can sort of just adjust these values ever so slightly throughout so that the grid lines look like they're animated as if it's being projected. And when we play that through, if we fit this to screen once again, it's already looking a little bit more like a hologram. Let's just move these keyframes around. Once again, you can customize this to look however you want. Excellent. Next thing we want to do is go back to our effects library and search for RGB. And you'll find in Video Effects, Image Control, the Color Balance RGB effect, which we can drag onto our hologram. And as you'll see, with that selected in your Effects Controls window, you go to Color Balance RGB Effects. You can reduce the red values a little bit, making it a little bit more blue. And you can sort of play around with the greens and the blue values so that it looks a little bit more blue and digital. And the last thing you want to do is then go to your effects library and search for an effect called noise. And you'll find that in Video Effects, Noise and Grain, Noise, drag that to your hologram layer. And with that layer selected, go back to Effects Controls, scroll down to your noise options, and here you can adjust the value of the amount of noise. Right now it's set to 0. Let's just up this maybe to 23. Let's see how that looks. And if we zoom in, we can get a closer look as to what the noise is actually doing. So that's with noise, and if we hit this button, you'll see without noise, it's a little bit more sharp. I prefer to have some noise involved. As you can see, I did a very mediocre job with the keying, but when you're actually zoomed all the way out, and just the fact that it's a hologram, it kind of gives you a little bit more leeway with a very poor keying job. But anyway, there you have it, an animated interactive hologram which you can apply to pretty much anything. Now, of course, we could just stop right there, but if you want to get really creative or just toggle the settings that you've already made for yourself, you can just double-click your hologram nest and double-click your video layer nest. And let's say we want to add some nice hearts floating right above here. And what we can do is just go to our graphics workspace, head over to some free Adobe stock animated images, and scroll around until we find something that we like. So this might be cool. Here's some animated hearts. We can simply just drag that right on top and adjust this so that it lasts for the exact same duration. And with that layer selected, we can just go up here to the vector motion effects controls and adjust the size so that it's perfectly contained on top of our subject. And if we go back to our editing workspace and go back to our original sequence and play that back, you'll now see that there's some nice hearts added. And of course, there's really no limit as to what you can do. Once you've done the hard part, which is adding all of the hologram effects and adding all of the animation, you can basically just go back into these particular nests and add whatever effects you want. And whatever you change here will be applied to your final sequence. And if you want to add a whole new level of realism, what you can do is invert your text so that it looks like you're reading it from behind as opposed to the front. And you do that by simply just going to your title and in your effects library, simply apply the horizontal flip effect. You might have to play around with the tracking keyframes once again because it is going to change where it is in frame, but you get the idea. Thanks for watching. If you have any cool ideas or suggestions that I failed miserably to include, shoot me a message or comment down below. And of course, don't forget to subscribe. These tutorials take a long time to put together, so show me some love and hit that bell.